Welcome, brothers and sisters at First Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Edward Mooney, and today I could not get over to Gypsum because of all the mudslides in Glenwood Canyon, and that's my Glenwood Canyon report for July 4th, 2021. I appreciate Pastor Carl filling in. He's much appreciated, and I miss seeing you. And I thought I would record my sermon for today and post it on Colorado Worship Online, just so I could participate a little bit in worship with you. By the way, the council and I will be discussing what to do because it looks like Glenwood Canyon might be having a struggle this summer every time it rains. So we're going to work on some options and alternatives so that we can continue with our worship. Well, welcome to worship. I hope it went well this morning. And here's what I would have said if I'd been there. I felt very passionate about this message, and that's why I've decided to record it. In our key verse today, 2 Corinthians 12, 2 through 10, verse 5 says, I will boast, but on my own behalf I will not boast, except of my weaknesses. And oftentimes we use the idea, well, God's strong and I'm weak. But I think there's more to it than that. First of all, notice that Paul says he will boast of his weaknesses. Now, we live in a world, a society that, well, we try to hide our weaknesses, frankly. And I've discovered something through my years of studying psychology, is that when we hide our weaknesses, we tend to push people away. When we become vulnerable, when we allow ourselves our more difficult parts to be seen, people can relate better. Now, I base this on the word in that verse in Greek, which was asthenes, which in Greek means without strength, weak. And I'd like to talk about it. There are some other words that could be used for this, such as helpless, sick, unimpressive, weak, weak things, weaker, and weakness. But I'd like to add another word to it that I believe fits in, vulnerability. I think one of the best ways that I've learned about God, there are two really good ways. One was being a parent, and the other was being a high school teacher for many years. And I'm thinking of a couple stories that come to mind when I think of this idea of vulnerability. I shared with my classes, that I grew up with an abusive alcoholic father. I shared how I struggled and almost quit high school. I shared how certain people reached out and helped me. And by sharing all those things, in a way, I'm sharing my weakness. And I'm being vulnerable. Of course, being vulnerable is very difficult because oftentimes when we express a weakness about ourselves, other people will use that to their advantage. They'll take advantage of it and use it against us. Well, I decided as a high school teacher that my teachers had done that for me, and I wanted to pass it on to my students. An example I can think of was my history teacher, Mr. Taylor Wagner, who was a veteran of the Second World War. And one day, somebody was kind of making fun of him. I always admired him, and I didn't understand why I was making fun of him. He always put on this facade or image of, I'm a real tough guy. And one day in class, Mr. Wagner broke down almost in tears when he heard the guy say something like, you didn't really see war. We have all these people saying they saw war. You didn't see war. And Mr. Wagner did something I can never, ever forget. He unbuttoned his shirt slowly, and he pulled it off. And running from up here all the way across was a scar that was thicker than my little finger. Of course, I was stunned when I saw this. You could see that it really warped how his chest looked. And he said, is this proof enough? And I looked in the man's eyes, and what I'm talking about wasn't the vulnerability of showing the scar, But what I saw in the man's eyes was he was reliving the pain from so many years ago. He had barely survived this machine gun bullet and had struggled. And I could tell when he went back to his desk, the class was totally silent. I felt great compassion for this man. And not just that because he was suffering, but that he decided that this was the best lesson to teach about the Second World War. Another story I like to tell, I knew a student was taking a Diet Dr. Pepper from my little refrigerator behind my desk when I wasn't looking. I saw it in his backpack once. So what I did another time was I put a little M for Mooney with a permanent marker on the labels of all the bottles, a little tiny M. And so sure enough, a little time went by and there was a bottle missing. So I asked the class, nobody said anything. I got them to work on whatever project it was, and I called this young man up. And I said, look, I know you're taking my sodas. Just talk to me. He immediately, vehemently denied doing it. And I said, please, I don't want to go into punishment mode. That wasn't what I really liked as a teacher. I was trying to build something with kids. So I said, if you talk to me, we can work this through. He got more dug in with his feet. I did not do that. How dare you accuse me of stealing? And I said, well, what we've got here is a challenge. And after class, we've got to solve the challenge. He said, go ahead and solve it. So I asked a security guard to come in. And he came into my class, and I explained the situation. And I explained, I don't want to search through a person's possessions, but I want to solve this problem. The young man got more adamant, more upset. He said, there's nothing of his in my backpack. So the security guard said, so you won't mind me doing a quick look? Go ahead. So he opened the backpack and he pulled out a bottle of Diet Dr. Pepper. And the young man continued by saying, that was mine. I got it across the street at the store. And I said to the security guard, I mark my bottles of soda with a little tiny M in the barcode area. So if you look there, we'll know where this bottle came from. Sure enough, security guard looked at the label. He looked at the young man and said, you have to come with me. And the young man said, what do you mean? He said, look, and he pointed at the M. The security guard went over to my refrigerator, pulled out another bottle, and there was the same M on the little barcode area. And you know what's strange? The young man continued to say, but I bought it at the store across the street. As he left, that broke my heart. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, there are biblical examples of this. Let's look at Abraham. In Genesis 18, Abraham says, let me take it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Who I am is nothing but dust and ashes. Abraham didn't have a sense of pride. He knew that by going to the Lord, he'd be vulnerable. Moses said to the Lord in Exodus chapter 4, oh my Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor am I even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Moses admitted his weakness. They believe he might have had a stutter or something. Of course, the Lord says, I'm with you. I'm going to put the words in your mouth. I'm going to take care of this. King Solomon, who we consider incredibly wise and wealthy, said, O Lord my God, by the way, this is in the book of 1 Kings, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. Although I am a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. Again, he admitted, I'm struggling, I'm afraid. Esther, who was a timid Jewish girl who became the queen of Persia, some Jewish people came to her and said, the king wants to kill all the Jews. And they said, go and talk to him. And she, of course, said, well, I can't do that. It's against the law. I'd be put to death. And After a while, she thought about it and she said, I know it is against the law and I may perish, but I will go in and talk to the king. Which means she put the desires of the people, the will of God, above her own safety. All of these things show vulnerability. And I hate to say this, like I used with my student who refused to acknowledge he took my diet soda. By the way, we made up a long time later and we became friends again. There's one bad example you're really familiar with. Adam and Eve, Genesis chapter 3. The Lord asked Adam, what were you doing hiding? And Adam said, I heard the sound of you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. The Lord said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? The man said, the woman who you gave to be me, she gave me the fruit and I ate it. Adam refused to take responsibility for his action. As someone who was a high school teacher in that situation I described, I wanted to forgive that young man. I wanted to use that as a doorway to a better relationship, but he shut me out. He became invulnerable. I will not deal with this, just like Adam did. And the one thing I've learned from all of this is that the lessons from these people in the Old Testament and the message from Paul are alive today. And the lesson is simply, if we wish to be closer to God and to one another, we must be vulnerable, we must allow ourselves to be weak, and we must be open to each other and to Him. It's by closing ourselves down that we feel distant from the Lord and from each other. I hope this sermon gave you something to think about this week. This week, try to find one way you can be a little more vulnerable and open to someone else and to the Lord. And may you go forth in peace. And know that my heart has been broken that I could not be there with you today. And I'm being open about that. That's why I needed to come online and just talk with you. And may you go in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I pray I will be able to see you next week. The council is working on this. God bless, and happy 4th of July, our country's 245th birthday. Take care.